Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills and grit take centre stage. I'm Donal and this is episode 31. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Hogan for a conversation that I think is going to cover lots of different areas from life and parenting and all that kind of good stuff. Everything. You're very welcome, Richard. How are things?
Thank you, Don. It's great to be here, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in. As I said, in terms of the conversation, I think we're going to cover lots of different areas, but we always love to start with a bit of context.
Sure.
About the guest. Context is good.
Context is everything, Donal.
So tell us a bit about yourself growing up. Where are you from and what was life like for you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Cork in Douglas, and what was life like? I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s through the Irish education system, had dyslexia going through school, undiagnosed till I was about maybe in 5th class and all that kind of stuff. No, it was mild and all that, but it definitely disrupted my kind of self-talk. I'm now an ambassador for Dyslexia Ireland, so I talk a lot to schools and students about dyslexia and what it means. So that caused a bit of a rupture in my thinking about myself. And then on top of that, my father was a journalist for the Irish Times, so he had a big job. You know, he was the Munster correspondent for the Irish Times. He was well known. Cork's a small kind of spot, but he struggled with addiction. He was an alcoholic, so that was hard to kind of get your head around that, because the tectonic plates under which, you know, things sat were always moving. You know, if anyone, I'm sure some of your listeners will know what it's like to grow up in addiction. It's the constant sense of things not being steady, the constant sense of things always moving. And so I always remember this image, you know, of coming home from school, and I'd stand up as I came up the lawn from Shamrock into Grange Erin, and I'd look to see if the car was home. And if the car was home, I'd have a sinking feeling, because anything could happen. And so and then, you know, some days it could be perfect. My grandmother lived with us for 20 years. This is the complexity of families. This is why I became a systemic family psychotherapist. They're so complicated. We had a loving family in so many ways. My grandmother was great fun. She was a good old Cork woman, you know. I'd come home at night from the nightclub at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be sitting in her little house, in her room, chatting with her, having, you know, eating chips and just talking to her about what girl I met or whatever. So we had all this dynamic going on as a kid growing up, and it certainly at times ruptured my sense of like joy and the idea, like talent, that you could have talent. You know, that was something, you know, I wondered about at times as a kid. I knew I had things in me, but I didn't know if they'd ever find expression, because at times things were quite heavy in the house and all that.
And how did, when you touched on the dyslexia there, how did it manifest in you? Was it
spelling, really? Because I was really good at English, you know, and I loved English, but I used to do my homework on a typewriter, because I found the typewriter very easy to work with. But I'd go into school and they'd kill me for using typewriter. I'd hand up my work and they'd say, you have to use your pen. And if I look at my handwriting, I can't write anything. You know, I've written books and they've been nominated for awards and all that kind of stuff. But if you handed me a pen to say, could you write that book? Not a chance. The minute I got a laptop and I went to college, things totally changed. But I was doing it myself at like 8 or 9, you know. I was trying to type because that was easier for me to type.
And was reading okay? Or
reading was okay, but not great. You know, my brother's ahead, really great academics and all that kind of stuff. And my brother, 2 years ahead of me, was just like a brilliant academic, like, you know, really super academic, and we're great friends. And I was looking at him and I was thinking, what's wrong? I thought there was something internal that was fundamentally wrong with me that I was trying desperately to hide. You know, it was something that you were like, you know, you're terrified of someone finding out about. And I held it for years and years and years. I never went for an exemption when I was going to school. I never looked for any, you know, I probably should have. I didn't get out of Irish. I had to do Irish, all the things that you might move away from now if you had a diagnosis of dyslexia in today's world. But I just didn't. I just hid it. I didn't want anyone to know that it was there. And it's always there. It's a little shadow that's there. But if you really tap into it and see what it is, it's a real gift too. There's no doubt about it.
So talk to me a little bit about the school years then. So academically, was it just that you had to apply yourself maybe more than your peers had to apply themselves to get through, or how did you manage that?
No, some subjects I would fly at. You know, some subjects I'd have, like, you know, I just fly through them. Like English, which is unusual, I was really good at it and I scored really well in exams and all that kind of stuff, and I'd be getting top marks and that. But it was just the spelling, and I'd have to really work hard to learn off the spelling, to learn off the spellings of what I was trying to write. I would just have to work extra hard on that. That was all really what it was. But, you know, I mean, it disrupted, when I went into school first, you know, I remember a teacher said to me in secondary school, oh, you're Shane's brother, you know, because he was so brilliant, you know. And I speak a lot to teachers about these ideas, you know. And then about 2 weeks later, she was like, are you Shane's brother? You know, you sure you're changed, brother? And that stuff hurt. You know, that stuff really you blow it off. You deflect it, but it really goes in, especially if you're sensitive. It really goes in. You start thinking that maybe I'm not that talented, I'm not that capable, I'm not. So you write these paradigms about yourself, and then you look for confirmation of them that you're not that talented, you're not that bright, you're not that capable, and you live them out for a bit until you figure it out. I meet people in my clinic, you know, who've been living them out till 50, 60 years of age, have been living out these paradigms because they get entrenched at such a young age, and they really disrupt your joy. I mean, they disrupt, and it's all rubbish. What the hell is dyslexia anyway? Do we know what it is? No, we don't know what it is. It's you know, a lot of people think like a learning disability, and it's like it's a difference. It's just a different way of looking at like letters, and I don't look at them and I don't think about them the same, and I'm bending them all the time, and I'm messing around with poetry, and I'm writing. You know, at the moment working on a novel, working on another book, so I'm always messing around with words, and I write a column every Thursday for the Irish Examiner. I'm always writing. To me, it's like therapeutic. I love it. Hand me a pen. It's hell, you know.
But it's fine if you're at a keyboard.
If I'm a laptop, I always say I was muted by the pen and I could sing with the laptop.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did you think you would do when you were going through those secondary years, or years of secondary school, when you visualized the future? What path did you think you would take?
I really couldn't visualize it at times, you know. I really couldn't, because our family was so stuck in addiction. It was chaos at times, you know, it was really bad. At times I really didn't see a future, and that's something I pass on to teenagers that I work with all the time, that there is of course a future out there, and at times it feels like there isn't, but there is, you know. And I suppose when I think about it, I was massively into music. I used to play the guitar. I used to get lost in music and play the guitar and write songs and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of visualized that. I suppose I had these grandiose notions of the next John Lennon. You know, I had that kind of stuff going on in my head, or maybe the next Wordsworth, or I had these ideas of, like, you know, being a poet, or, you know, writing songs, or just communicating. That's what I always wanted to do, was kind of communicate. But I remember how I got into this field so clearly, and I wrote this story in the opening of my new book called Home is Where the Start Is. My mom said to me, I was about 15, my mom said, do you want to go see a psychiatrist? And I said, I would love to go see someone, because I had notions of myself sprawled out on the couch, and this Freudian type chap, or young, sitting over me asking me all these questions about my childhood. And when I went in, we were sitting there, and the secretary said, you know, doctor, whoever will see you now. My mom leaned into me and said, don't tell him about Dad. He knows Dad. Right? And I was like, oh, what the hell am I going to tell him now? It was like, you know, when you were going to confession as a kid before you went to your thing, you make up things that you did. I kicked my brother. I swore at my mother. You know, you make up these little minor sins that you committed. So when I went in and I sat down, the psychiatrist said to me, the first thing he said to me was, your dad's a marvelous writer. And I was just like, well, I'm absolutely hopeless now. I thought
there's no place to go.
Where do you go? Yeah, where do I go now? And so I didn't tell him anything. His diagnosis was depression. His prognosis and his thing was medication, Prozac. This was like early mid-90s, Prozac. And so I knew I wasn't depressed. I knew my environment was depressing. There's a big distinction between those two things, you know. And I remember walking out of that encounter. It was such a brief thing, 45 minutes, whatever. I remember walking out thinking, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do something that I'm going to work towards that. And I know that everything I do is motivated by that kid sitting there, you know, that kid sitting there who felt absolutely isolated and hopeless and alone. That's the motivation. You know, when you understand yourself, you know what's motivating you.
That's the why.
That's the why, definitely, yeah.
So when you look back now through the lens of a professional that's expert in this area,
Yeah.
how did you navigate that chaos?
At times I kind of disassociated from it. I know, you know, I definitely did. I got, you know, like with everyone else in the 90s, there was a bit of drugs going on and all that kind of stuff. I drank. I did all the stuff that you do when you're unable to have the tools to cope, you know. I avoided, I pulled away from people. I broke up relationships that I was in, you know, and I was very aware that I could have been my father. I was very aware that that's not who I wanted to be, you know, and I wanted to have a relationship with somebody, and I wanted to build a family, and I wanted to bring stability and, you know, love into my life, stable, predictable kind of like relationships. I wanted to have that in my life. I was very aware of that from a very young age. I was always thinking about a family, my own family, and how I would be in that family. And I used to always have this, I mean, I was only 17, 18 thinking these things. I remember thinking, like, no barman is going to know my name, you know. I'm not going to go into a bar because I used to go with my dad and be like, "Oh, how are you, Dick? How are you?" Everyone knew him. You know, I remember thinking, I was only 7 or 8, you know. And I was like, "That's not going to be fucking me, you know. That's plopping up on the counter and talking to other people who have got families at home. I want to be at home. I want my kids to be joyous when they see you. Of course, we don't have the perfect family. We fight like everybody else, but I wanted them to, you know, be happy when they saw me, not terrified of some sort of czar coming in the door, you know. And that kind of healed an awful lot for me, my own family with my own wife, and you know, building a family that was stable and nurturing.
It can go one way or the other.
It can go well.
It can either...
You have two responses to dysfunction.
Yeah.
You either seek it out and you live out the paradigms that you understand and what's familiar to you. Because I work a lot with alcoholic children and all that, and they would find it very hard to sit in quietness. You know, this room is very quiet. They would find this very hard to sit in. It'd almost be an endurance for them because they have become totally and utterly hardwired for the plate to go through the window, for the doors to be slamming, for screaming and roaring for the mom, you know. So they're absolutely, that's their normality. And so to sit in quietness and to sit in calmness and all that is very problematic. And so they seek out a partner who is problematic and has problems there, and they live out that. It's a terrible tragedy, isn't it? I mean, they just
like
get, they're just
codependency.
Well, they're just wired. Their brain is wired for that life, and off they go into that chaos, and they live that chaos out. Or you can become, you know, you can kind of like do what I did and kind of like look at that and say, well, that's not for me. But that takes a particular bit of, I suppose, early insight, which I don't think many of us get that when you're so young.
So tell us then about the path into education and into university.
So I did. I did started off doing English and psychology. I was always interested in psychology. When I look at my life, my grandmother lived with us, and I always loved older people. I loved sitting down at a young age and interviewing them and looking at their lives and figuring out what decisions they made that brought them to where they were. I loved that at a very young age. And I used to set up cameras like this, and I'd interview my gran. And I'd have a little microphone plugged in, and I'd ask her, and I'd only be like 10 or 11, and I'd ask her questions, and I only found kind of a protocol of questions, and I had a question protocol for her, and I was going through them. I was only about 12, and they were very systemic psychological questions. You know, why do you think you did that? Why do you think you picked that person? What impact did that have in your life? And I have her whole life recorded, and all the songs. She was born in 1912, so I have all that period of life recorded. I just loved psychology. I loved listening to people's life stories. I just loved been around people and hearing their stories. And so I did that in college, English and psychology. And then I kind of went off into an English degree. But I was always interested in the students that were having a bit of an issue or struggling a little bit. And they used to come to me and talk to me after class. And that love of psychology never went away, you know. And so then I went back and I was thinking, what would be the right way to pursue this? I was thinking through my English, through my teaching. I looked into systemic family psychotherapy. And then as I sat there on the course for 4 years, this master's with UCD and the Mater Hospital, I was like, this is exactly the language of everything that I've understood about myself. I'm just getting the language for it, you know. And so it was an amazing experience. I found that incredibly, it was just one of those courses that you do, like, you know, a master's in science medicine. It was just like mind-blowing because it challenged you, but it was just amazing. And then I wrote a paper about how to link the systemic theory with educational pedagogy. And Trinity read it and asked me to come in and do a PhD with them on it. And I did that, and I went to America then on a Fulbright scholarship to a university over there, looking at how to bring some of the ideas that I had in that paper to America and all that. So it's been just this, you know, journey that you didn't expect to ever go on.
And importantly as well, and we just touched on it before we went live, you've done plenty of TV stuff, but the TV show is what brought you to our family's attention, because we were absolutely hooked on
It's a great show,
Raised by the Village.
Yeah.
So for anybody listening who maybe hasn't seen it, talk us through the concept of the TV show.
It's a great show. I love it. It's so warm, and there's so much goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, and there's so much work that goes on afterwards. I'd still be very much in contact with a lot of the young adults who are involved in the show, and they'd message me and we'd be chatting a lot. You know, it's a great show. It's something special in it for sure. The concept is that for kids who are young adults who are struggling in whatever aspect of their life, take a break from that life. And I suppose what I'm always thinking about is myself there. Show someone that there's an alternative, that you won't always be in this, that, you know, there is other routes to go down in life, and that we like, you know, the Truman Show, you kind of accept the reality you're born into and you think that's it, that's the only reality, and of course it's not. And so the concept is that we take someone, a teenager, give them a break, come down to the country, work the farm, and just see any of that interested you, or take a break from technology. Any of that interests you, and it's just an incredible experience. There's something I honestly think there's something really unique in that experience.
They seem to be quite emotional by the end of the experience. How long do they typically go down for?
It's hilarious. I'm just thinking of some of the stories there. Some of them have got boyfriends and girlfriends down in the area that they went down to, so they're still visiting and all that stuff. They go down for about a week. And I go down and meet them and chatting to them, and then I meet the parents later on in my clinic, and we talk about what happened in the conversation, what's been happening for them down there, and about maybe some strategies to kind of help them to get out of whatever it is that they're stuck in back home.
It's difficult to get any significant change to happen in such a short period of time.
You'd be surprised, Donal. Honestly,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. It's incredible because the main problem today is phones and technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the isolation that it's bringing into young people's lives. You can see it in the show. They bring down burner phones with them, they've got a second phone with them, and by the end of the show, you'd see them all. Oh yeah, I forgot that. When we're handing back the phone to them, you can see they've forgotten it because they're connected to their community down there, and that's such a key core concept of what we're trying to do, is show someone who might not be so connected to the community, who might be isolated. Look what it's like when you're connected to a community. That's true resilience. I mean, that's true meaning and belonging. That's what it's all about. Just to show them that and take a break from their phone.
Well, okay, we got to talk about phones then.
I mean,
it's one of the big challenges for parents.
It is probably the biggest challenge. I have a teenager myself. I have 3 daughters myself.
So how do you manage it in your house? Because I know that this is something I don't manage well.
Yeah, no, well, you have to manage it because it's going to get out. I wrote a book in 2019 called Parenting the Screenager. Because I was seeing
great title.
I know. I think I might have coined the phrase, but look, who knows? But I saw coming into my clinic every day. It was like unbelievable, the tsunami before the pandemic of like teenage boys caught in gaming. And the World Health Organization classified it as the new mental health condition in 2018. And so when the WHO have it, what happens next, I understand this part, is that the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, which is the psychiatric Bible, that's the classification of all illnesses and then rolling out of psychotropic and drugs, they have a pending in their 5th edition. So the 6th edition will follow the WHO. And so what you'll have then done, which is like dystopian, you'll have a pharmacological response to what is a parenting issue. You'll have heavy psychotropic drugs being given to kids for gaming. Now that's dystopian, so we have to watch that. We have to be very careful of that, and we have to parent this thing. There is, I believe, it's hard. I live with this all the time with my own daughter. It's hard because they're so immersive and they're so addictive. They're designed to go in and out, go in and out, go in and out. They're designed by very powerful psychologists. They know what they're doing. I mean, the push notifications, like buttons, all of those, infinite scrolling. The guy who invented infinite scrolling regrets it now. I mean, you're watching the absolute collapse of the social world of adolescents because they're just stuck in the phone. You give an adolescent their phone, they're stuck in it. And they will tell you, and the research, there is a tsunami of research around this. The Surgeon General in America came out there recently before the summer and said that it's never been more miserable to be a teenage girl, and I absolutely agree with him. I mean, completely. This comparative aspect, the filters, this idea of perfection. When we were kids, if the lads went down and played football on the local GA pitch, you wouldn't know about it. But if the girls go down to Starbucks, it's all over your social media feed. And so exclusion physically hurts. So there's a huge cyberbullying, massive issue, which nobody really is talking about. I think I'm out there on my own shouting with the government. It's pornography. It's a huge problem amongst younger kids. The IWF came out there recently between 8 and 10-year-olds. Out of 275 sexual images, 92% of those were self-generated. Now that's the early sexualization of children, and so I don't want to sensationalize and scare people because there's loads of positives around technology. I wouldn't be able to write a book if I didn't have a laptop. They do connect their children. There's no doubt about it. This is how they communicate and all the rest of it now. But you asked me a very good, important question that I could talk about technology all the time, is that you have to have boundaries and policies in the family and do it early. Yeah. It's so important because if you don't do it early, what you have is an inverted hierarchy where your child is telling you, this is how I live in the family and I go on my phone, I'm not taking out my bedroom, I come home when I want, and it's misery.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because, okay, first of all, I'm thinking of the most recent family dinner that we had, and remember the adults are sitting at one table having conversations and the teenagers and kids are sitting at the next table. And they have to be told so many times, like there's 6 or 7 of them sitting around, all on their phones, or all on their devices.
There's a rule 1.
Yeah.
Rule 1. No, seriously. And do it early. Do it really early, because as they get older, it's so hard. It's so, like, how do you tell a 17-year-old, 16-year-olds, 15-year-old to do things? It's much harder. Do this early. When they get the phone, you say, here are the rules. You lay out the rules. You set the culture early and say, no phones at the dinner table. You try and give your child a respite during the day. They will thank you for it. Right? Honestly, I see it in my own kids. No phones in the bedroom at night.
That's a tough one to
It's tough, but you got to set it.
And then there's the hypocrisy as well.
Well, see,
of
you
parents.
got to do the same thing yourself, though. Here's the thing,
which isn't easy.
But well, you got to, you have to template the kind of behavior you want your children to kind of, follow.
Yeah.
And so, they have teenagers particularly have a heightened sense of hypocrisy. And if you're there kind of going, get off your phone, Jimmy. So many teenagers sit with me and go, my dad's so full of it, And he says he's only doing his work emails, but I see him scrolling Instagram.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's very hard to bring in boundaries and have a policy if it's not a family policy. If it's just like punitive to your child, it's hard to get buy-in. You need to get buy-in. And so before they get the phone, I would set these rules out. This is what I did with my own daughter. And, it's still a fight. She'd still, at the summertime, try to get into the bedroom. I'm like, give me phone out of the bedroom. And she's not happy with me. But you know what, Donal? She's not my best buddy. She's not my best friend. I'm not her best friend. I'm actually her parent. And if she's not happy with me, I'm okay with that. And I tell her that. I'm saying, look, I know you're annoyed with me. That's the rule.
Yeah.
Because a best friend doesn't tell you to take the phone out of the bedroom. A best friend doesn't tell you when to go to bed or what to do. Or a best friend isn't trying to give you morals and principles and that. Generally, they're out there having a bit of fun with you. That's what she has with her friends. I want to have a really loving, deep relationship with her. But ultimately, I'm the person setting the pillars there. And I know that's what she needs. I know that's what she wants. She doesn't want me as a best friend. Yeah. Teenagers will try to position you as a best friend and say, "Oh, Donal's a much nicer dad. Donal's dad is so sound. He lets him have the phone in the bedroom. Why can't you be more so?" That's just all a little bit of teenage adolescent manipulation. You have to stay in the parental role there.
Yeah. And that brings us very nicely to the evolution of parenting, because we're of a similar vintage. Yeah. And I think parenting from when we were kids to today is vastly different.
Yeah, it is. No,
we ran wild and free and figured out our own and built our own resilience. When I say we ran wild and free, like you said, you went off on your bike, you played football, you were gone. You went home when you were hungry.
Yeah.
Or when it got dark.
And there wouldn't even be a conversation about where you were.
Exactly.
Just come in, you're like, oh, yeah, you survived, good.
Exactly. My mum always says to me, she'd say, where are you going? And I'd say, out.
Yeah, out.
And that was it. So talk to me a little bit about then versus now, pros and cons.
Yeah. Well, I suppose what you have now with us is like an overcorrection to probably too much looseness. We always overcorrect everything.
Yeah.
If you watch anything in society, you'll see an overcorrection. Something needed to be corrected, but we overcorrected it. And then, of course, our age, I'm sure the name Jamie Bulger means something to you, right?
Of course.
Madeleine McCann.
Of course.
Jessica and Holly Wells, all these stories. I still have the image of their Man United jerseys as they're walking through their little village there. Those things massively impacted on our soul, And so when we came to have kids, we think about that terrible, heinous crime that was perpetrated on those children. So we overly protect our own children a little bit because of those things. That's lightning striking. It's it happens, but it's very, very rare. But it impacts on us as parents and how we kind of go. Can I go to the shop, Dad? I'm going out. Where are you going? And you're kind of going, no, you can't go to the shop. Up, and then we go up to your bedroom, play your game. You're safe up there. I know where you are. You can't be abducted up there. You see, and that's what's kind of happened. I think the difference in that is we've kind of like been too lenient with the upstairs phone gaming and all that stuff, and overly coddling and overly protective in the real world.
Yeah, and really trying to manage things that weren't managed for us. Like when, we talk about conflict resolution, friendships, and somebody falls out with a friend, and the parents almost want to get in and solve the problem for them instead of giving them the space to solve it themselves.
That's it. And that's what I'm telling parents. That's my message that I'm talking to parents about all the time, is that where did you get the idea that your kid won't suffer? Your child has to go through stuff. They have to experience the world, because if they don't experience anything, you're sending them out there into the adult world absolutely lacking any immunization. And so when they meet a strong Donal or a strong Sandra, they're going to collapse under them. And so we can't solve everything for a child, and nor should we try to endeavour to do that, because actually what you're doing there, when you think about coronavirus and all that, we give ourselves a little bit of it, so that when it comes into your system, you can manage it. You know what I mean? And that's a really important idea to have as a parent. So when your child comes to you with an issue about bullying or anxiety, to watch your reaction.
Yeah.
Ask questions rather than trying to solve. So I always say to parents, ask a question, because you're by their side when you're asking questions. when you're trying to resolve it, you're on their side. You're down with them at their level. You know, you're going down to the school saying, why aren't they playing with Sandra? I mean, you're not helping your child there to figure that out and to feel empowered. And it's all about giving your child the memory of overcoming things.
Yeah.
You know, that's
and modeling that at home is important as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The conflict resolution piece.
Of course, and it's important. I say this to parents all the time. You know, it's important for your children to see you not at your best. It's important for your children to see you hungry and tired and all the rest of it. But how you resolve that with them is whether they're going to have a healthy reaction to conflict or not. You know, it's a really important thing. It's so important that we build our children's resilience so that they can manage the real world, so that they can understand their place in the world and critically evaluate the world and have the antidote to anxiety. We're in an epidemic of anxiety. There's no doubt about it. It's the big thing amongst teenagers. The antidote to that is having memories of overcoming, because memories allow you to predict who you'll be tomorrow. And if I have no memory of overcoming, well, then when I think about tomorrow, I'm absolutely terrified, because how the hell will I manage that thing, whatever that is? Anxiety is a fear of an unknown future event. And if I have no concepts of myself dealing with stuff from the past, how will I manage anything in the future? Now you're paralyzed. You know, now your warning system is firing all the time because there's this unknown threat that I will not be able to manage.
So where is that coming from? Because personally, as a kid and as a teenager, the word anxiety wasn't part of the vocabulary.
No, lexicon, it wasn't, no.
So what's going on?
Well, I mean, I talk about this a lot as well. I think we have, again, I think the mental health industry reminds me of the diet fad of the 90s. Remember 6-minute abs? 5-minute abs?
Yeah.
I tried those things many times. Get Brad Pitt's body in Fight Club in 4 minutes. I was like, 4 minutes sounds like I can do 4 minutes. It was all rubbish, right? It was all rubbish. And there's a lot of influencers out there on TikTok, and there's a lot of conversations going on around mental health and in schools. You know, I spoke recently with the Minister for Education about this. We have to be careful about the message that we're giving our children, because currently we're kind of endorsing mental health issues amongst our children. We're making it almost unpopular, undesirable to thrive. And that's the message we need to switch. We don't want to go back to the dark ages where we didn't talk about mental health, where there was a stigma. No one wants that who works. Nobody wants that, right? We need to have, what we need is the right structures in schools, the right structures to help children when they're struggling and when there's a vulnerability there. Not this constant superficial talk about it. You know, it's such an important thing because we're so suggestible as a species. And if you go into a school and you talk, I meet this all the time, you talk about, say, self-harm, and you leave the child with the idea of self-harm and you don't do anything else besides that, what's going to happen, you know?
It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something.
I mean, just imagine if I was in school in the 80s and Paul McCartney came in and talked about self-harm. This is what I did when I was stressed, I self-harmed. The chances of me going home and doing it really increases. You know, so we have to be very careful. And then on TikTok, you know, you'll see it. We did a thing there with Primetime last March. I don't know, did you see that? Where we set up 3 fake phones of 12-year-olds and 13-year-old girls. And very quickly, it was been swamped with like really heavy, really disturbing stuff. Like, my parents will finally understand how much they hurt me when I'm dead. I mean, suggesting, you know, really tragic outcomes to vulnerable children there. So we have this massive tsunami of like information around them that's not helpful. We need more positive. We need to help them with their thinking. We need for them to be able to kind of critically evaluate themselves and think about how they're feeling and have good thinking around those moments when we all feel negative. Because when teenagers come into me, I'd say to them, between 1 and 10, where are you? And they'd say 4. And I'd say, that's decent enough. I'd say 4 is good. It's not bad. I said, it's okay to be okay. That's the message I always give them. Okay is okay, right? Take that. And I can see them kind of going, well, the guy, you know, I'm told all the time that I should be absolutely brilliant, you know, from TikTok. This is how you're going to be brilliant if you do this, if you break your day down into this. Kind of going, no, that is the opposite of feeling good. And they're constantly be told to check in with themselves, do a body check.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if you ask yourself, Donal, every second, how do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel now? How do I feel now? You'd be absolutely miserable.
When you look and when you compare life when you were growing up as a kid and you look at life now, or like, let's take school as an example, primary school and secondary school. It doesn't, in my view, it doesn't feel like there was as much talk about there was no talk about mental health.
There was no talk about mental health.
But even when it comes to other behavioural issues or diagnosis of different things, they weren't talked about. So do you see it that kids that maybe were atypical in terms of neurotypical or neurodivergent, was there less prevalence? Or was it that they were more excluded or it just wasn't talked about? Because it seems like a huge change in a short period of time.
Well, I think since 2007 and probably 2012, when you started having just ubiquitous internet, endless internet access, and then phones. I think the arrival of the smartphone is a massive moment of like.
Is that a trigger for you? Do you think, or is that a trigger to this change in behavior?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're surrounded by mental health talk all the time through the influencers on TikTok and all that stuff. Definitely. Of course, the 80s was a terrible time if you had any issues going on, anything going on. I mean, in my class, there was no one that was gay, of course. Of course, there was. But, I mean, that was a terrible time to come up in. You know what I mean? That was, for those ideas, that was a really hard time to exist in, you know. If you had anything that was outside the atypical kind of experience, it wasn't a great time. It was a time of freedom in some ways, as you went off and did whatever. But I know from talking to my friends from those days, it was a harder time. There's no doubt about it. But I suppose you can look at it both ways. I mean, there's no exact evidence of this, but the empirical stuff would point to the fact that we're swamped with social media and we're swamped with talk about mental health, and that's what's kind of like creating this current situation. But we've also lived through a pandemic. We've also had an economic collapse. We've also had wars all around us. So there's always that contextual part of it too, that like around us. And I think climate change as well. You know, imagine being a kid today and you're surrounded with the idea that I've had a child said to me there recently enough that what's the point in all of it, Richard? It's going to be the planet's going to be dead soon, and kind of going, Jesus, that's not the message we want to give to our children. So there is this fatalistic kind of thing out there as well, on top of the fact that school got cancelled and all that kind of stuff. They've had a lot to endure. There's no doubt about it.
I want to talk briefly about your two books.
Yeah, okay.
Two different areas, but I think for anybody that's listening to this and that's interested in the conversation, they'll be interested to know about the two books that you've written. So will you give us an overview of where you were at and what motivated you to write each one?
Just Parenting the Screenage was the first book I wrote. That was, I just wrote that in response to all the parents coming to my clinic. And I was just thinking, okay, you know, working with all these families, if I could just write a guide, I call it like a practical guide. Everything I do is kind of practical. A practical guide, because there's so much theory. And you can really sit there as a parent going, how the hell do I apply that, right? And so I was trying to make a practical guide so parents could take away a few tips and read it quickly. It's a short book. Read it quickly to give them some ideas about how to parent this modern phenomenon of technology. So that's what that was. And, you know, it was I think it was a decent book, and I think it helped a lot of people. I guess still get messages from people saying that book really was helpful. And then after that, because I write every Thursday for the Irish Examiner, and then I was thinking about, I always think experts get positioned. That word, I find that a hard word to kind of live with as an expert and all that. I always think there's something about the expert that they always present themselves as somehow, you know, perfect. Their family is perfect. Their life is perfect. They're sitting there with all this knowledge. Just listen to me, and it's like, that's bullshit, really, to me, you know. And so I wanted to write about how to thrive, how to look at your family, look where you come from, the partner you chose, you know, and all that, or maybe the potential partner you're thinking about choosing. I wanted to write a book that wasn't a parenting book, but about how to thrive in life, how to overcome the paradigms that shackle us, the paradigms that hold us back, you know, from succeeding, those negative voices that I've had myself, those ideas about yourself, about achievement, talent, all that kind of stuff, how to overcome that stuff and start to thrive. And so that's why I wrote the book, Home is Where the Start Is. I was trying to show people how to be your own therapist, really, how to figure out your own stuff and how to think about where you are today and, you know, how to get to where you want to be in the next couple of, you know, tomorrows.
So that kind of goes back to the whole family of origin thing and how, I suppose, how much agency the individual has to be the master of their own destiny.
Exactly. And what I was trying to show in that book was that my own life is the theory in practice. I told some of my own story. I started off the book telling that story with the psychiatrist, you know. That's the opening narrative of the book. Coming out of dysfunction, coming out of a difficult family, coming out of addiction, and how to thrive after that. And the impact of the book has been, I was nervous when it came out, you know. I was very nervous.
Well, there's a vulnerability, isn't there, in sharing your own?
Yeah, there is. But I was, you know, my relationship with my father was not bad and all the rest of it, but I asked my family first. I have two older brothers who were quite private. And I knew that telling my story, I'm telling their story by proxy and all the rest of it. So I asked my mother, can I tell this in this book? And she said, yeah, it's your story to tell. Go for it. And so they gave me permission to write it.
How did they feel about it when it was written?
I'd say mixed feelings, to be honest. I'd say it was hard. I'd say it was definitely hard for my mom to read it. Because I'm talking about the isolation and the the stuff that you endured as a kid and all that, I'd say definitely was hard. Yeah, of course. I mean, anyone writes anything about a true lived experience, it can be quite hard to accept that that's what actually happened.
And it's interesting as well, the different perspectives within a family.
Of course.
Because, you'll talk siblings that are talking, they say, oh, I remember this. And then the other one, I don't remember it like that at all.
No, we don't process information across the species in the same way at all. So we look at things differently. I'll come away from this experience thinking something else happened. You'll think something, that's just, that is, that's it. And I suppose I did run it past my brothers, is this how you perceive this? And they were saying, you're doing too generous there. Right?
Interesting. I'll tell you the final thing I want to ask you, Richard, is the other societal change that we've had since our days growing up is divorce in Ireland, separation, co-parenting in separate households, etc. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of those challenges, the impacts on kids of where co-parenting across two different households works well, and then when you see instances of parental alienation and real conflict, polarized households.
Well, parental alienation is something I have been passionate about for a long time because I saw it at my clinic, and it's such an insidious thing. It's so destructive. I often call it like scorched earth stuff. Like sometimes very hard to come back from. Alienating a healthy parent from a child's life, it's so destructive. And the child sometimes is coerced into saying a terrible narrative about the parent, whether dad or mom, and that stuff is corrosive. And then the legal side of that is so costly, and then the reputational side of that is also very costly. And so, I've worked with very devastating cases there where people have been alienated from their families because of whatever happened in the relationship. And it's really destructive stuff. And I wrote about that in Homes Where the Starters. I wanted, because the publisher was saying, you want to put this in? I was like, I have to put this in because people are suffering with this. People write to me a lot through my column and through other avenues there. And that's one that I get lots of questions on. How do I? And from grandparents who are alienated from their grandchildren's lives. It's terrible. It's so sad, isn't it?
It's the lowest of the low. Somebody that will do that.
But they're struggling too generally, and they've got a lot of psychological things going on there. Low differentiation of self, like the Medea kind of complex where you're going to do anything to hurt somebody back and all this kind of stuff. And so it's brutal. It's really brutal. So I've often worked with the person who's alienating. You're trying to pull them back from this desire to destroy, because ultimately they destroy themselves in the process. The children figure out eventually, Dad, actually your mom wasn't what you said they were, and and you destroyed this relationship during this period of my life. There's no outcome that's good with it, so it destroys everything that's good and wholesome. And then blended families, I suppose I think we've never had more blended families in Ireland. I've worked with loads of really great blended family stories and lots of positive stories there. I suppose things that I would see that I've worked with that were quite negative, maybe a bit of jealousy in one of the couple about the relationship with the other person's relationship with their children. That can have really negative impacts on the family, or the other person's ex-partner in their meddling in the relationship and that. Children vying it out for attention, sibling rivalry, hyped up because you're in a new dynamic and you're fighting for mom or dad's attention there. So there can be those kind of things. I did put that into the book as well, actually, in Homes Where the Starters. I looked at all the different families and what are the positives and what are the negatives, and how to overcome the negatives if they're alive in the family.
Brilliant. So for anybody that wants to follow your work or to find the books, where are they best to find you?
Well, you get the book, you get Homes Where the Starters in any bookshop, right? That's out there. Parenting the Screen Age might be more difficult. You might have to go to the actual Orphan Press, who are the publishers of that. Join me on Instagram. That's where I do most of my posting. There is Instagram as well. I'm fighting away TikTok all the time. I'm too old for TikTok, but Instagram is where I am, and I have a petition on Instagram about stopping the easy access to hardcore extreme material for children. So if you join me on Instagram, sign up to that, because I think we need a collective societal push there to the government to say, that stuff you're sending to our children, that you're allowing these companies send to our children, it's poison. It is poison, and it disrupts their understandings of intimacy. And intimacy is such a healing and nurturing part of a relationship. And if a child, particularly a boy, develops these, and we're talking about blended families, right? Just to leave you on this note, pornography currently today is about stepdad, stepmother, stepsister, stepbrother. They understand that they have to change it to make it more extreme, to fire dopamine. And imagine if you're 8 years of age.
Yeah.
'Cause there's no blocker there to stop you from getting onto the stuff. There's no gateway. And so if you go on there and you see all of a sudden stepfather and stepdaughter, all of a sudden you're kind of thinking, should my stepdad be someone I think sexually about? I mean, it's so disruptive. I've worked in school where a senior infant consumed hardcore extreme material. It's dystopian to me. There's no blockers there, you know. It's the porn in the pocket. And we have to say that has to stop. Because that has we know the research is there, that has really, really adverse effects on our children. So that get onto my petition there and sign that, please.
Okay, well, what we will do is we'll add your Instagram and the links to the publisher and to the
Great
book to the show notes.
Yeah.
And can I just say, thanks a million for coming in.
Thank
it's
you,
a
Donal.
really interesting conversation. We didn't know where it was going to
Yeah,
go, but we
it's good.
covered a huge amount of
lot there.
stuff. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram. It's @talentmatters_podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor, Sanderson, and thanks Richard for coming in.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time.